A lot has changed here in the last 24 hours. The next 24 hours could be key. The next 3 to 4 days could be key as well.
Yeah, I feel like we're looking for more and more answers, Dr. Knabb. A little bit more confidence, a little bit more consensus today, but still a lot more questions.
Yeah, but of course, last night, the two major models agreed on something different than what they agree on tonight. So there still could be significant changes, but the risks for the East Coast are going up.
All right, you heard it here first. We're going to break it down all throughout the show. Now, areas already seeing effects from 94L, because I know everybody always says, well, what's the answer? And we wish it was that simple. It's not, but there are some things that we can deduce at this point.
Yeah, we can, and the general lesson from the last couple of days of looking at the models is it does not give you the answer to look at the single current run from the major models, because, like you said, they agreed last night, but they agreed on something totally different. And the models might agree now, but they might both change. And it's not just the single runs from the models. We got to look at the ensembles, all the alternative scenarios. So this is almost certainly going to develop. But the reason the Hurricane Center has held off on starting advisories is they want to make sure it survives Hispaniola. But I think, I'm not the director anymore. Right. If I was, I probably would have started advisories on a potential tropical cyclone today, to get watches up for the Bahamas. But in any case, I think it's going to develop, and it's going to head over these very, very warm waters.
Do you think if Hispaniola gives it a little bit of a trouble, a little bit of a hiccup, you think there's enough warm water, there's enough working for it that it will get its act back together?
Yeah, I think it will, because Hispaniola mainly disrupts systems that are already tropical cyclones. And then that circulation hits the land, and then it has to get its act back together. This is a tropical wave. It hasn't even formed a well-defined center yet. So
less to mess up.
Yeah, it could still easily form over the Bahamas. But this is a taste of the U.S. models, the hurricane models, the global models, all taking it at different speeds toward the southeast coast. But that different speed is a critical thing, because this trough that's been producing the severe weather and is now moving farther east is going to bring it northward, but we still have Humberto in the mix. We might not have a full-fledged Fujiwara of Imelda and Humberto going around one another, but Humberto is still going to fight with this trough for how far north future Imelda gets. Does it make landfall? How much time does it spend over the Carolinas?
I feel like for this segment, you and I should have had a rope to do like tug of war, like I'm the trough, you're Humberto, because it really does feel like, all right, so which one kind of wins that tug?
Yes, because they're both going to have an impact. Even if you don't do a Fujiwara and rotate around one another, these systems are going to be less than 1,000 miles apart nearly the whole time. That is within enough distance to affect the track, or at least affect the track forecasts and make them more uncertain. So let's take a look at those forecasts. Here's the latest single run of the GFS that continues to insist on development. That's, again, the models, even the global models are saying after Hispaniola, this gets its act together. But Humberto is slow moving for a while, but then when we get to Sunday, it's starting to catch up. And you've got the cutoff low here over the southeast, and that is what is in the latest main model runs steering it quickly toward the coastline.
So that in this situation, in this setup, that trough is winning. So that's winning the fight over Humberto. Now, I know folks in North Carolina are going to look at this and go, oh, good, well, that's what it says. But as you pointed out, this is just one model run, and we've seen so much uncertainty. Would you argue that really southeast to mid-Atlantic certainly still very much in play?
Absolutely. Anybody from Florida northward still needs to watch this. Things can change. When something hasn't even formed yet, you don't even know where the center's going to show up. Got to watch. The other thing is, Alex, if this is a cutoff low, cutoff lows don't move very much. And so if this does make landfall in the southeast, it might hang around in the southeast for days.
Noticing that, and so it just kind of rains itself out. So after landfall of whatever strength or intensity we get, we could also be looking at a prolonged rain event.
Yes. Now, again, the main models are generally in agreement. Cut off low. Here comes Imelda. Humberto's hanging back for a little while, but it does affect the speed at which Imelda goes toward the coastline. But very similarly, comes ashore, sits there for days. So we're really concerned about an inland flood event in addition to all the other hurricane hazards. But now let's look at the ensembles from the Euro. These are all the alternative scenarios. And you look at how all the Euro model solutions for Sunday morning are generally near over the Bahamas. But that's about as much agreement as these members ever have. Let's go just 24 hours later into Monday morning.
We've got everything from off southern North Carolina near the Outer Banks to south of the Bahamas.
And here comes Humberto into the picture. Let's go 24 hours further into the future. So what that means is landfall could happen as soon as, you know, early on Monday. But then on Tuesday, Humberto's definitely getting in the mix, and you have European model solution lows that are still hanging back over the ocean or just sitting over South Carolina or North Carolina. So it's possible that on Tuesday morning, you could still have a significant system that hasn't come ashore yet because that cutoff low is trying to bring it north, but Humberto is slowing that down. So they don't rotate around one another necessarily, but these are close enough to make the timing of landfall very uncertain.
If a solution like that happens and then we've got Humberto closing in, do you think it would be more likely that we could have a system, or maybe not more likely, but at least possible that we have a system that kind of hangs there on the coast and then moves off to the east?
Yeah, that's possible. In fact, that is what could be happening when we get to Wednesday. So now Humberto is somewhere east of the East Coast, although some of these lows could be what's left of Imelda coming back offshore, or it's the possible Humberto being farther west. And so this is when there could be some attempt at rotating around one another, but it's also caught in that upper low. So when landfall occurs and how long of a time future Imelda spends over the southeast, the timing is still very uncertain because Humberto is still in the mix.
Yeah, so as we're hearing, Florida northward and even interior southeastern spots, we want to keep a close eye on this. Dr. Knapp, thank you. Mike, over to you.
Okay, you know,
So many rooms, and I'm like, where's the food come from? But anyway, cruising to Bermuda this week. Obviously, we're watching Humberto, a tropical storm now up to 60 miles an hour. So that gradual strengthening has been occurring, and that's going to continue. We're going to be looking at a hurricane into the start of the weekend and perhaps even approaching major hurricane by the early part of next week. So this is 470 miles northeast of the northern Leeward Islands. So you see the islands way down there. They've been dealing with the rainfall from what could be Imelda. Not right now, 94L currently, but Humberto staying well away from the island. So we don't have any advisories for any islands in terms of tropical storm warnings or other issues. So there's some good news. It's not until we look towards Bermuda that we look towards perhaps land effects. But you can see the latest forecast track from the National Hurricane Center does keep this between the U.S. and Bermuda as it moves off to the north and west. So Saturday afternoon, now we've got our hurricane. Even late tomorrow, we've got our hurricane with 80 miles an hour. Sunday afternoon, National Hurricane Center saying we've got a major hurricane on our hands, staying in that realm until later Monday. By Tuesday, still a hurricane as it likely moves further to the north. So also the interactions with Imelda. If we get Imelda, something we watch, visible satellite imagery here, give you a look at Humberto. We're going to talk about both vulnerabilities. Dr. Knapp, you know, I think sometimes when people think tropical systems and see the forecast, they go, okay, this is a coast problem. And it will be, you know, as it makes its way close to or even onshore. So we start with the coastal impacts, but we're not going to sleep on the inland impacts either.
No, absolutely not. And we're going to give you some tangible things that you can be doing now to get ready for the potential impacts, realizing in a place like South Carolina that our population, for good reason in that beautiful state, both coastal and inland, has been going up.
Yeah.
And recently, the state of South Carolina has updated their evacuation zone. So I urge you in South Carolina to go to scemd.org and make sure you know which evacuation zone you're in. And you might actually live in a place that didn't used to be in an evacuation zone and now is.
You know, Dr. Knapp, we've talked about this in the past. South Carolina really has their act together when it comes to online resources. They have a great app that you can use that can be a vital resource for you.
Absolutely. So get these resources and start taking advantage of them now and plan today where you would go and how you would get there if you were told to evacuate. That goes for Georgia, that goes for Virginia, that goes for North Carolina. All of these states have at least the potential for storm surge-driven evacuation issues, but also wind and inland flood-driven evacuation issues. So this is what you need to be thinking about. Nobody needs to evacuate right now, but plan for possible evacuation. Have a plan if you live in a storm surge evacuation zone. If you live in a high-rise in a storm surge evacuation zone, high-rises on the coast of South Carolina are not safe places to be when there's storm surge. You don't want to be stuck in a high-rise in a power outage when there's storm surge in the area. Any structure that's unsafe from wind, including mobile homes, absolutely. Nursing homes. How many times have we seen people get into dangerous situations when they're left at nursing homes? If you know somebody who's in a nursing home, figure out the plan today. And then finally, anybody who's at risk for inland flooding. You mentioned this earlier tonight already, Mike. Think about at least the possibility of staying at higher ground so you don't have to have water rescues come get you.
Well, these are good points. Something like a nursing home, you may need to be thinking, we could see effects as early as this weekend, depending on the movement of the storm. So it's Thursday evening. This may happen, you know, a lot of people go, well, it came out of nowhere, and we don't want this to be a came out of nowhere. It's going to likely occur. Yeah,
here it is Thursday night, and we might go into a watch phase maybe Saturday or Saturday night. Now, surf, rip currents are going to be an issue. Storm surge could be an issue. And it's not just, if this is the GFS, if it's right, you could have a landfall that brings surf, rip currents, high waves, storm surge, everything. And then if it goes inland, like the GFS is saying, then you might think, okay, well, by Tuesday, it's all done. But here comes Umberto in between the Carolinas and Bermuda, and it will keep the rip current and high surf risk high all the way into the middle to latter part of the week, well after potential Imelda's inland.
And that may extend beyond places where landfall happens. So if you live like on the Jersey Shore, you could experience some high waves and rip current danger there.
All the way up into New England, the coast of Maine. We could lose people if we aren't careful at the ocean from both of these systems. So only swim or spend time at the beach near lifeguards. Got to assume those rip currents are present, and if you're caught, stay calm and float. Once you're out, go parallel to the shore and call for help if you're unable to swim. The lifeguarded beaches might be fewer and farther between this time of year, so you might want to just stay out of the water.
Yeah, very good point indeed. Now, we're also looking for the potential for some
long history of devastating flood events in South Carolina and North Carolina, and this is just one model run from the Euro just for Monday and Tuesday, showing the potential for very heavy rainfall. GFS would be a little farther to the left, but that's just Monday and Tuesday. It's at least possible that it gets trapped in a cutoff low, and once it starts raining around the time of landfall, say on Monday, and it rains into Tuesday. But watch what happens beyond Tuesday if this Euro model is right. It continues to rain in North Carolina Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We got to at least be ready for the potential for a significant inland flood event.
Thanks. On this Thursday, I'm Alex Wilson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Bettis. We're talking about what's likely to be future Imelda. Could it become a hurricane? May make a run at that, and may make a run right at our coastline.
Yeah, our hurricane expert, former director of the National Hurricane Center, Dr. Rick Knabb. He is here tonight. He is checking out the latest data and notorious flood and landslide makers. I know both of us worked in that market. Even just heavy rain events sometimes would lead to these landslides that could shut down roadways. But obviously, Dr. Knabb, when we have these tropical systems, it is a widespread stretch of very heavy rain like what we saw with Helene.
Yeah, and as bad as Helene was, and it was the worst disaster in western North Carolina history, you might be thinking, well, that's really never happened before. Not on the scale of Helene, but we have had, Mike, a number of relatively recent systems that have brought devastating and deadly flooding to this same area of the country. This is not the first time.
The Southern Appalachians is so vulnerable, right? I go back to 2004 season. We had Francis. There was kind of a primer for Hurricane Ivan that really dealt a heavy blow to western North Carolina.
Yeah, because they were only a couple weeks apart, and Francis brought several inches of rain to western North Carolina and vicinity, and then Ivan brought a similar amount just a couple weeks later, and we lost 8 people in the state of North Carolina from Ivan, and there was a lot of damage and landslides, and people kind of forgot about that around the country because of what Ivan did closer to the coast. But that was just a preview of what was going to happen only 4 years ago with Tropical Storm Fred.
Yeah, and this one yet again. And, you know, we look at the damage from that, and I think sometimes people think landslides or mudslide is just like a simple, you know, maybe the road gets washed out. But these can be really damaging events. Now here's 2021, and it got right into downtown Asheville.
Yes, and this was a deadly and catastrophic flood in western North Carolina, just not on the scale of Helene. We lost 6 people in Crusoe, North Carolina. They were all in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and it was from landslides, mudslides. More than 200 structures were destroyed in one of the counties in western North Carolina. So if you look back to those systems, you can't say that Helene was the first time this has ever happened. It's just that the first time it's happened on this large a scale. So we knew the area was vulnerable, and now we know way more about just how vulnerable it can be. So we got to get flood insurance. We have to have evacuation plans so that when we get the next Helene, we can save lives.
What's so interesting about all this is, generally speaking, the mountains is what makes it so enticing to be there, right? And by and large, the weather there is usually pretty good almost year-round, right? But when it comes to the tropics, it's a different story because the mountains then work against you.
Yes, they absolutely do. They squeeze out more moisture, and then the water that does fall pools in the lower spots, and gravity takes water and rocks and mud down slope, and it's a devastating kind of force. But it's in many ways similar to storm surge in that it doesn't happen very often in one particular spot. I mean, just what you said, Mike, about the southern Appalachians being one of the most beautiful places to live and the weather doesn't usually get too bad. In most hurricane-prone areas, most of the time the weather's really, really good, but every once in a while you got to deal with the threat of a catastrophic disaster. So we've got to look at these Helene numbers and really drill into our minds that hurricanes and tropical storms are not just coastal events. We have just as much of a hurricane problem in the Appalachians as we do on a coastline in Florida. It's just for a different reason.
And I know we're focused on western North Carolina right now, but there are other areas that could see some very heavy rain that have a similar setup. Parts of southwest Virginia could get in on some very heavy rain out of this event. Parts of eastern Tennessee, even upstate South Carolina has a decent bit of terrain.
Absolutely. And when you look at where all the flash flood warnings were in Helene, that drives your point home.
Yeah.
And they weren't just everyday flash flood warnings. Look at all these flash flood emergencies, including one in the Atlanta area.
Yeah.
So many of us are vulnerable to catastrophic and life-threatening flooding with inland tropical systems. So all of these past events, I think Helene has probably convinced everyone, okay, we need flood insurance. Okay, maybe we need to think about evacuation plans. We get it now because of the scope of the event. But there are other mountainous areas in the eastern U.S. that didn't get dramatic effects from Helene. Farther north, you need to learn from what happened in Helene and be thinking about it's not just about water. Look at all the landslides that occur. I-40 got blocked in Tropical Storm Fred. Helene wasn't the first time that happened.
Well, do you think it's one of the circumstances, though, it has to affect you first before you realize how bad it can be?
Yeah, coastal people deal with that same mindset. So all of us collectively need to prepare for the next disaster in a place we don't think it can happen.
Future Imelda right here on Weather Unfiltered. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Mike Bettis.
I'm Alex Wilson. As always, our hurricane expert, Dr. Nab, with us. Things have intensified. Yesterday, we got Umberto. We're still waiting to see if we get potential tropical cyclone or even Imelda. You've said this is currently over Hispaniola, and that's part of the reason we've got the wait.
Yeah, I think Hurricane Center is just waiting to make sure that this gets its act together after going over that mountainous island. But it's inevitable that this is going to become a depression or a storm. I mean, you know, we had our 90% system early in September that didn't form, so I guess there's an outside shot that 94 doesn't develop. But I think the conditions are a lot different here in late September.
All right, so let's get to it and show you what we're worried about. You know, areas that could see the effects from